I absolutely love the Persona series. Being able to be a student during the day that studies and hang out with friends to increase social stats, to a demon killing machine that can summon mythical beings using a number of different techniques, including shooting yourself in the head, is something that I never quite experienced in the game before at the time. See, I too was a former ball and gun player who only knew 2K and Call of Duty, and it wasn't until a friend put me on to Persona 5 a couple years ago that eventually opened my eyes to the JRPG genre. After beating Persona 5, I went down a rabbit hole of Persona franchise, and now that we got in a Persona 3 remake, which I covered a year ago, and a remake of Persona 4 on the way, I wanted to rank the Persona games from my least favorite to my personal favorite. What's going on with all you beautiful people, extraterrestrials, or whatever you want to identify yourself as? It's your boy Rob, yes, just Rob, and I'm back with another video. Before we get to the rankings, I can't stress enough that all the Persona games are good, and I don't think there's truly a bad one. It's just that some are better than others. And I'm only focusing on the mainline games because if I were to do every game in the entire franchise, including the spin-offs, this vid will be at least an hour long. If you enjoy gaming content such as this, then you're in the right place. Consider tapping the bell icon and subscribing to the channel so you never miss a vid from yours truly. Now that we got everything out of the way, everybody strap yourselves in, hands if you decide to ride at all times, and somebody keep my intro. I want to give an honorable mention to the first Persona as I didn't play it. The story looks interesting enough as it's similar to another entry in this vid. The group of friends including the protagonist plays a game called Persona, oddly enough. While playing, the student loses consciousness and meet Philemon, who is the god of this universe, and he gives them the ability to summon reflections of their personalities, which are known as Personas. Shortly, the group discovers that the town has now been overrun by demons and it's up to them to figure out what's going on and how to stop it. There's also an alternative quest line called the Snow Queen route, which I think is a much better way to go. While the story is intriguing, I ultimately decided to skip the entry because I felt the combat was a bit outdated with its grid system combat. I played games such as South Park, Fractured Butthole that offer the same style of combat, but there's more nuances to its loop that keeps me engaged and more modernized. You have to actually make sure that you're properly positioned to land your attacks, synergize with the rest of your party, while also not being in range of the enemy's attacks. From what I've seen in P1 is that as long as you can land a high damage ability, you're more than likely going to win the fight with relative ease. It's also not to mention that the first person dungeon crawling was not it for me at all, and I knew that was going to piss me off. Now let's start the official list with number 4. People are going to either understand where I'm coming from when I reveal this game, or this is going to be my death sentence. Persona 3 is the game that introduced Atlus to the West. This is also the first game in the franchise that featured its social sim elements that we currently see now. This game was absolutely huge at the time when it first released back in 07, and there wasn't as many RPGs that feature elements like going to school and doing activities to level up your social stats and unlocking new abilities through the social links. Persona 3 follows a group of high school students trying to cope with, understand, and accept death in the world surrounded by it, as well as find their own reasons for living. You, as the MC, join the group C's in order to investigate the Dark Hour, which is a mysterious time period between one day and the next day that only few people are aware of. And as you all know, during the Dark Hour, you explore Tartarus and fight shadows. I absolutely love the story and set of the original game, and the fact that you fight shadows at night instead of the day, like the later entries, is also a nice touch as well and really builds into the atmosphere of this game. The concept of death is something that we all will inevitably experience in life, and it's evident in the characters having to metaphorically accept the fear of death to use their personas by actively shooting themselves in the head to unlock that power. What I'm not the biggest fan of, however, is the pacing of the story, the combat, and the characters. When the story hits, it absolutely hits, but there's also downtime in the middle of all that where I feel like we're kind of padding the game a bit. And while that is an issue in all of the Persona games, especially the modern ones, it's more evident in this game. I would argue that P3 probably has the weakest cast in the franchise, and that says a lot in a world where you have Morgana as one of your mascots. I'm not a fan of Mitsuru because her whole gimmick is just being the mom of the group and having a rich dad. I hate Yukari, and after discovering the true intentions from her father, I feel like her potential was just wasted and didn't really provide any real growth from that. Junpei only really has the fact that he fell in love with the op as a redeeming quality of his character, and while he's supposed to be a gimmick character or some sort of comic relief character, I feel like there's other characters in later entries as well that done this better. And Ken also had wasted potential too, but Akihiko is pretty cool. And if this vid does well enough and gets a certain amount of likes, then maybe I'll do a more in-depth breakdown going over the characters of the entire franchise as well. Probably gonna separate them between different games though, like Persona 3 will get their own vid, 4 characters will get their vid, and 5 and so on. As far as the combat standpoint, in the OG version, you couldn't control your party members, so you had to rely on the AI to help. This was extremely annoying because you would have someone like Mitsuru always trying to use a charm ability, but it never actually worked, so it turned into a wasted turn. And while Reload does fix this problem, it also in turn made the game feel extremely easy with other spammable features such as Theurgy, even on the harder difficulty settings. Once you master this, the game pretty much becomes a cakewalk. And as I mentioned on my full review, I feel like the pretty and updated graphics kinda took away the grittiness of the game and took away what made Persona 3 stand out from its later entries. Again, I don't hate the game, and I will tell everyone that Reload is a better option for someone to play who's never played the original or someone who's getting into the Persona franchise for the first time. But for someone who played the original, it didn't quite stick the landing for me, and I do respect what Atlus is trying to do in the remake, however. I'm gonna keep screaming it to the heavens until it comes true. Atlus, please remake the Persona 2 duality. Even if you have to make 2 separate releases similar to what Square is doing with the Final Fantasy VII trilogy, I will buy it on the spot. I made a separate video about Persona 2 and why it was such an underrated gem, so I won't dive too deep into it, but what I will say is that if you enjoy the story of Metaphor ReFantazio and enjoy its mature themes, then Persona 2 is right up your alley and you should definitely give it a try. It's a duality fight focused on the experience of isolation, guilt, grief, and so much more, all rolled up into a perfect synergy. Tatsuya is easily the best silent protagonist in the entire franchise, and even though he doesn't say a single word, you can feel and understand every emotion he conveys. This is even more prevalent in the end of the first game, Innocent Sin, where Tatsuya had to make an important decision, and once he chose a selfish but quite understandably relatable choice, it directly caused a separate timeline which led to the events of Eternal Punishment, which is the sequel. In the sequel, you play as Maya Amano, a previous party member from the first game. I like her more in Innocent Sin because she was always this cheerful and empathetic party member that always kept the rest of the group focused and motivated, and I feel like Element was lost in the sequel because you made her a silent protagonist. Both games feature similar combat styles in the form of retro 2D art, and it's probably the weakest aspect of the game. It's definitely not bad, and I would personally say the combat still holds up, but you can definitely tell yet you're playing an older JRPG from the 90s. There's frequent random encounters, and the animation for the Persona moves can be a bit janky. I absolutely love the world building of both games. In this game, rumors become true once you spread them out to a rumor monger, and these rumors can provide different perks and abilities for various item shops, such as spreading a rumor for the weapon shop to provide more higher tier weapons. I also love that both games were relatively short compared to their counterparts. Innocent Sin takes about 35-ish hours to complete, while Eternal Punishment can be beat in about 47 hours. The only thing that stopped this game from being number 2 on my list is again the combat. I feel the later entries on this list just blows it out the water, and even though I'm more of a story-driven guy in my RPGs, Persona at its core is still a dungeon crawler, and half of the game is in fact fighting demons. That's why I stress enough that if there's any other game that Atlus is gonna try to make a remake for, it should be 2. Only because, you know, the combat is definitely outdated, and also it's kind of hard to get your hands on both games unless you have a PSP or PS1 or you're doing emulation. And that's because Eternal Punishment came out in the West first back in the 90s on the PlayStation 1, while Innocent Sin later came out as a remaster for the PSP. Again, I talked about this more for the reason of why that happened in my Persona 2 video, which I will have linked down in the description. This is probably one of the better written stories that Atlus has put, not just in the Persona game, but possibly in their entire catalog. And I don't think we will ever get anything on this level again. What's there to say about this game that's already been said? It's gorgeous to look at, fun as hell to play, and it's Atlus' darling baby. I mean, look at all the spin-offs we got just from the Persona 5 IP alone. It was my introduction to Persona, and I'm sure it was a lot of you all currently watching introduction to the series as well. I used to hate turn-based combat games, thanks to games like Final Fantasy 13, but Persona 5 ignited a love for turn-based gameplay that I didn't realize I had. The game features some core aspects from traditional JRPGs that you can find in other games like Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest, while also providing its own identity such as baton pass. Just like the usual games, enemies have weaknesses. When you hit an enemy's weakness, whether that be certain spells or with physical attacks, they are knocked down or stunned. You're then able to initiate a baton pass by passing the turn over to a different party member. This ends up creating a snowball effect because if you keep hitting the enemy's weakness or get a critical hit, the baton pass resets and you're able to pass it to another party member. Not to mention that if you hang out with certain party members and match their social links, you can get additional benefits such as additional damage, recovery boost, health points, and SP recovery. It can truly change the outcome of a battle when done correctly. Persona 5 is not only great because of its combat though, the game is also very gorgeous. It's made from the same engine as another Atlus game, Catherine, but something about Persona 5 just give it its own flair. Every time a Persona is used or when a party member unlocks their Persona for the first time, it's a cinematic experience and the game is going to continue to age like fine wine. P5 also has the best level designs in the entire franchise, minus that god-awful Akuma dungeon. Every dungeon fits that boss's personality and their motives in such a well-detailed way that you can tell that there was some thought behind it. I also love P5's theme about breaking free of society standards and essentially a group of outcasts, underachievers, and people blinded by social norms coming together to change people's worldviews. I just wish the cast of characters were a bit stronger. Ryoji is awesome, and I'm also a fan of Yusuke, but some party members like An just didn't do it for me. I like her social link as it focuses on her having self-doubts about her physical appearances, and her proving that she's more than just a hot piece of meat, but it loses value in the main story when we mostly use her charm and appeal to get through obstacles in the game, such as his infamous pool scene in the Shido's Palace. Just not to also mention that there's not enough time to really explore other characters like Haru's social link, as she becomes a party member late in the game unless you operate using a guide, which that just kills the immersion in my opinion. I also want to point out that Maruki from P5 Royal is by far the best antagonist in the entire series. The fact that he starts off as this school counselor who gets the party members to express their deepest fears and insecurities and creates a metaverse where everyone has all of their wishes and lives, essentially this perfect yet false reality, was a nice touch. It didn't feel like he had any morally wrong values unlike the other bosses in this game, and after beating his palace, it made me have to step away from the game and appreciate the depth of his character. I love Persona 5 and it was a great introduction to one of my favorite franchises in gaming, but there's one more entry that I would consider better and my personal favorite. The amount of love that I have for this game is truly something special. In a world where there are so many live services games and greedy CEOs that never picked up a control in their life, ruining some legendary games due to chasing sales instead of a great product, this game was made with love and it's evident the moment you boot it up. In the golden version, you're met with this cheerful and jolly melody with the cast dancing, but in the background you're seeing images of victims being strung up on telephone lines, and that fits the vibe of the game. The story of P4 follows a group of high school students dealing with a mysterious TV channel dedicated to distorting and exaggerating the truth of who they are and their identities. See, there's a string of bizarre murders going around in the town, and it's up to the group to go into the TV channel and explore the mysterious world and perform rescue missions in order to save its victims from death. While P4's story starts off as a simple murder mystery that doesn't offer many twists in the story, and can get a bit repetitive, it's the stuff in between all that where the game truly shines. You're not in a big bustling city like Shibuya in P5 or Tatsumi Port Island in Persona 3. You're in Inaba, a small town that can be often seen as the countryside of its verse. But that in turn helps make the relationship with the party members and the social link so strong. There's not a single member of the investigation team that I don't like, and that says a lot because Teddy does exist. However, at least he provides some comedic value unlike Morgana. Every party member has their own reason for joining the team after facing their insecurities and true self, besides just, oh, it's the morally right thing to do. That leads to my next point, which is that the theme in this game is arguably the best and most relatable in the entire series. The game's tone is set on party members facing their true selves in the form of shadows, which are physical manifestations of their own insecurities. My favorite example of this comes from the form of Yosuke, who has built up resentment ended up in Inaba after moving from a big city, and his desire for stimulation and fear of being alone. He doesn't have the stereotypical family member or someone who he deeply cares about passing away or being forced to run a family organization. He just simply doesn't feel he belongs in the town and wants genuine love, whether it comes from a friend or a significant other, and that can be seen as relatable. Even someone like Yukiko, who is forced to run her family's inn as she's next in line in the manager, despite not having any interest in it whatsoever, is an example of that stereotypical trope in JRPGs, and it's handled rather well as we get to see some of her own character traits unfold. She has a unique humor which makes her have uncontrollable laughing fits even if she finds the joke not that funny. She also is a terrible cook that wants to become better so she can one day cook for her potential husband. I can go on for days just referencing the characters and their social links, which are some of the best in the series, but to avoid spoilers and for any potential new players to P4, I'm going to pivot over to the gameplay aspect. There are similar aspects in Persona 3 and it follows the same framework, but there are more nuances to the gameplay such as the team-up abilities, which can allow two party members to unleash a special attack to deal significant damage to an enemy. This is implemented in later entries like P5 Royal and the P3 Remake, but you can also get to control all the party members in this game, which is a nice addition compared to its predecessor in P3. The level design was also superb, with my personal favorite dungeon being Nanako's. It's something about being in the clouds and that awesome music playing in the background that just does it for me every single time I play this game. While the combat can be seen as pretty much a solid step up from Persona 3 and doesn't break any new grounds like 5, the real star of the show is this setting and the cast of characters, including those social links. And after completing the game, I was left speechless as this was truly a one-of-a-kind experience for me. Thank you all for watching the video. As you can tell, I absolutely love Persona, and I'm always finding myself playing at least one of the games every year. I'll be caught with the Persona 4 remake when it drops, but honestly Atlus, it's time to make Persona 6. No more spin-offs, and if you're not remaking Persona 2, then there's no point in doing anything else related to Persona. I hope they ass ain't crazy enough to try to remake Persona 5 because that game still holds up and it's playable on literally all modern platforms. And if I get an announcement about them trying to remake Persona 5, trust me, you're gonna get a much different video and it won't be a positive one. But if you enjoyed the video and want to see more content like this, go ahead and drop a thumbs up for them on your way out and let me know how you would personally rank the mainline Persona games down in the comments below. As always, I hope you all stay safe and stay dangerous. It's been your boy Rob. Yes, just Rob. And I'm out. Peace.